All right, welcome back from that short break, everyone. I am Bob Cohn, your moderator for today. If you're just joining us, we started out talking about backup. We went from there to archive. We went from archive to talking about the cloud and how that impacts. How do we bring it all together? That is what we might call storage lifecycle management. In this next session, we're not only going to hear from SpectraLogic, and that will be Mr. Jeff Braunstein, who is our Director of Product Management, but we are also going to hear from one of our outside partners, Mr. James DiVito, who is Director of Solution Services for OpenDrives. So here, as we look at implementing a complete storage solution, it has to do with primary storage, backup, archive, it may be in the cloud, it may be on-prem, but how do we bring all of those together? So with that intro, Mr. Jeff Braunstein, if you're with us, there you go, and there's James. We are going to turn the floor over to you two.
Yeah, hi, thanks a lot, everybody. I'm really, as you said, Bob, really pleased to have James DiVito with us from OpenDrives. And today, James and I are going to have a little discussion about implementing a complete storage solution and what are some of the best practices around that. So, James, I'll let you lead us off here.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, by the way, I had already downloaded that calculator you just mentioned, Bob. I love spreadsheets and calculators and all that.
Me
so
too.
As soon as I saw it pop up in the last session, I was like, oh, I got to dig through that.
I'm a sucker for them. Great.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, to start off, SpectraLogic and OpenDrives have been working together for quite a while now about integration and testing. I think through the time, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, I think we found some higher level best practices of if we're driving a solution, we want to make sure that you target some of these next generation things or some standards as we move forward, because the ways of the past might not be the ways of the future. And so, as we've talked, really what we found when it comes to storage is you're going to have maybe an on-prem, or you have some kind of active workflow or content that you want to tackle with storage, as well as you will have some type of long-term perpetual storage requirements, especially with, compliance and policies. You're going to have to store this stuff forever. So really we found a complete solution includes the active storage, the long-term, as well as some type of storage management software that moves that for you, because, a lot of manual movement just adds a lot of administrative effort to there, as well as, we'll talk to this probably a little more, is you want to use the right tool for the right job. I know within the COVID world, I've got this text message thread going along with my friends, and we're all become these like home builders. And so we got into this big, and I don't know if this will stick for everybody, but this big argument of like an impact driver versus a drill versus a screwdriver. I mean, there's uses for each of those. It aligns to the same to storage and the life cycle of the actual data itself.
Cool.
So
thanks, James. So talking about this joint solution, I think, I guess there's a little bit of why too, right? Why can't you just, OpenDrives is a great active storage system. Why don't we keep all the data on there? Well, we want to save costs. We may want to share the data. There's other reasons, but you really need to think about having the right data in the right place at the right time, as you said. But when you think about integrating these two types of solutions, so a active storage system, a long-term storage system, and then the glue between them, right? The data management. So what are some of the best practices for a complete solution like this? So James and I are going to touch on some of these that we think are important.
Yeah, I think this slide describes it perfectly, but I've gone into many data centers and seen just cables and network and switches and everything all over the place. Standardizing your network going for future technologies, at least in my mind, or at least within OpenDrives, we see that as being, as we move forward, standardization on Ethernet. Although we do see, uses of fiber channel and InfiniBand and all that still in the network. I'm just curious actually about your perspective. Is there a kind of moving forward plan, or do you see anything in the horizon?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple areas, right, James? We each have our own respective systems, myself for secondary storage for Spectra and yourself for primary. So maybe I can share what I've seen and what people are thinking, and then you can kind of share the same. But what we've seen is we've seen a very active interest in Ethernet-based solutions. So whether that's, and that kind of ties into when we say existing network, we're saying, existing Ethernet based network, right? There's an interest in being able to keep that and span that, whether it's so that I can connect to the cloud, so that I can connect to maybe an on-site disk storage type of some kind, as opposed to connecting it with fiber channel or block storage or something, right? Being able to have that Ethernet-based storage to object storage or whatever has been key for our customers. The other thing is, traditionally we've often seen, like with our tape libraries, is oftentimes like fiber channel to the tape drives themselves. And if you have enough of those tape drives and enough activity, you may need like a fiber channel switch, and all of a sudden you've created yourself a fiber channel network now. And that's not typically something that people want to manage. The devices are expensive. It can be expensive to keep the staff to manage that. So what we've seen is a strong interest in Ethernet-based solutions all the way to tape. So there's tools out there like adapters now where you can have bridges from Ethernet to, say, a SAS tape drive, so you don't have to have any special switches other than your Ethernet. Some tape drives now are even direct all the way to the tape drive themselves with Ethernet. So of course, we're very interested in supporting that. How about on your end, James? What have you seen?
Yeah, seeing that as well. And, it maybe I'm a bit biased. OpenDrives is a NAS storage, system, not NAS storage company. So we tackle and have based the fact of Ethernet and SMB and NFS as being, standards moving forward that are going to be heavily used. The big thing for me is, you see a lot of competition, innovation, performance that has been going into Ethernet switches over the years. So things like, Rocky, RDMA, things that are almost, wrapping InfiniBand within an Ethernet type of protocol, standardizing that and just using higher performance switching, which wasn't the thing of the past. You needed fiber channel switches to get that lower latency and that performance from there. But moving forward, the competition, the different companies innovating in that technology, we just see pushing forward. I mean, I'm exacerbated by seeing 400 gigabit plus networking speeds coming out being standards or soon to be hit,
Exactly. It feels like, at some point there was interest in these other technologies being fast, but now it seems like all the efforts being put into Ethernet because that's what people want. It's simpler, it's easier to manage. People are familiar and comfortable with it, and they want to save costs. So that's great.
And it's a bridge to the cloud, right? You need Ethernet to speak to a lot of the services for data storage when it comes through to public cloud.
Exactly. Okay, well, kind of on a related note, let me take on the next one here, which is a solution that should be built on open standards. So James, maybe you and I can talk a little bit about what are some of those open standards we're talking about that we think are part of a good solution. Maybe we can also discuss what are the pain points if you don't have it, what are the benefits if you do have it. So on our end, what we've seen is that people want data stored in a native format. So especially as they migrate data to a secondary storage solution like Spectra or like the cloud, they want the data to be in the same form that it was originally stored in. So if it's in folder 1 and it's, movie1.mov, it should look exactly like that when it's moved to the secondary, cloud storage or whatever, whether it's a protective copy, archive copy, whatever. The other thing is, so that way they don't get locked in, right? So, and we can touch more on that. The other is storing it in a technology that is accessible with other tools, right? So, like when our solution writes to tape, we use the LTFS, which is an open standard, right? So there's a couple benefits there, and maybe I'll transition into benefits now for ours, then you can talk about yours. So the benefit is that access without us, right? So you can access the data anytime you want without our tools, so you're not locked into us, right? It also gives you more flexibility, maybe on workflows you want to do, and especially with LTFS tapes, we can. Again, those tapes can be read by other tools. They can also be shared, right? So maybe I want to create some data and give it to somebody else. Maybe I'm doing a project for somebody, and that's how I'm going to share it with them. How about on your end, James? What have you
I
seen?
completely agree. I mean, moving forward, you should have that flexibility. I know in the past, there's been some requirement for, proprietary protocols or things were needed to solve some problems. But these days, open standards, you talked about LTFS when it comes to taping, to tapes. We have the same in the NAS space. SMB, NFS are standards out there, and they are supported on all of the major client, applications and or client OSs, that is. It allows for easier interoperability. It allows you to pick up some system, put something else in place, and still allow for communication. I think custom drivers required for specific component integration is more of a thing of the past, because you don't need those specialized or proprietary formats to really hit the same performance or usage that you do that you can hit these days.
How about APIs, James? How does that play into open standards?
That's a great point. APIs is a big thing that I've seen out there. A lot of, you get a lot of UIs and interfaces that are showing you some information, but everybody's about, AI, machine learning, analytics. So being able to have integrations by API calls, or being able to pull data from systems into maybe a centralized, even like a Splunk server or something like that, where you can analyze that data and look at trends and benefit to move forward. I've definitely seen that as a requirement moving forward. If you don't have open and published APIs, you're going to fall behind for the people, especially very developer heavy companies moving forward. How about you all? Like, do you all standardize on APIs, and what do you have out there?
Exactly. Yeah. So we've got, and I think, again, like you said, best practices is to be able to expose, your application outside, beyond just your own tools, right? I think that's really key. Doing it in standard ways, using common REST interfaces, when available, using standard protocols, right? Of like S3 or something like that. So yeah, absolutely. We've seen that as a key thing. I think one other thing we were talking about, James, as we were prepping, I remember, was we were talking about upgrades, and that kind of becomes an issue too when you talk about open standards, right? Being able to change vendors or even upgrade within your own vendor's product, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that touches on what you were talking about, like proprietary file systems or wrapping things into a specific format or bucket. What happens in the future, 3 years down the line, 3 to 5 years down the line, where you need to replace the hardware because it's aging, and then all of a sudden you found that you're pretty much tied to the hip because of some way that it's connecting, or a file system, or even from an administrative standpoint. Like, if you picture the middle manager software going away and it's in a proprietary format, how are you supposed to restore that data? So that complexity, that pain that might come down the line, standardizing on open standards, making sure that the data format is in the same wherever you put it, will help down the line for wherever you want to move this, and based on policies or backup criteria, or whatever you need.
Great. Okay, well, let's transition over to the next topic. So the next one is easy to get up and running. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the pain points about this first. But I think what we saw, James, is it's so many groups have a need to get up and running fast. If they don't, I mean, not only is it just a painful process to get set up, but in a lot of organizations it means dollars, right? So I think you had an example of folks that are. Was it in some of the broadcast workflows you see where, people need to be able to get up very fast, right? Or it's money, right? Or lost revenue, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So OpenDrives always had a history in post-production since our inception, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit in a few slides. But we are, heavily moving and doing a lot of work in the broadcast space. And what really surprised me when just talking about workflows and solutions and what are the requirements of this use case, these people are in a truck outside a stadium, setting up for an event one weekend, tearing everything down, driving somewhere else, doing it the next weekend. So being able to deploy, storage solution servers, have it up and available for 24/7 for that actual event, tear it down and move it forward, is a huge need. And, talking to some of these, broadcast engineers that have been in it for years, they set up days in advance to come up to try to start setting up storage in the workflow, because they have to buffer in the fact that sometimes these things aren't plug it in, turn it on, there you go. And I would say that's kind of contrary to what we're seeing in the consumer world, right? And I'm totally stealing this from a coworker, but like we've come to get used to pulling out an iPad and just having a couple buttons and configuring, and there you go, and you're using this tool. Why not have that blend over into the enterprise storage space, right? And I'm just curious, from your mindset, are there any particular items that lean toward that show
Sure.
easier getting up and running, or more integration and able to deploy more easily?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, it's just it should work out of the box, right? I should receive it. I should get it and be able to easily install it, or have it easily installed and functional. And, there's kind of a line between functioning and performance. Of course, you may need some help from, your vendor's professional services to get it to perform with all the other components in your network and everything. But getting up and running functionally fast is key. So that out of box quickly, get it racked and get it running as quickly as possible. The other one is, like you mentioned, with the iPad type of mindset, is the easy modern interface, right? It should be very straightforward. It should be well designed to do exactly the tasks I need to do. There shouldn't be a million buttons on the thing. It should guide me through quickly what I need to do and work on different devices. Generally, I shouldn't need like a command line configuration, right? It should be easy to set up.
Yeah, what's been surprising to me is I've often talked to some, prospects or customers that some solutions have been taking weeks, if not months, to deploy. And I don't know, and maybe this is something the audience or somebody can speak to, but is that a common standard out there for like months to actually get something deployed and up and operational? To me, that should not be, that's not okay, right? That's what we're talking about here, is that even if it takes that long to set up, I think about down the line, administrative efforts. If it breaks, how long is it going to take to fix if it was that complex to get up and start, running in the first place? So
Exactly.
That's a concern that's out there to me.
Yeah, exactly. And so, just easy stuff, right? Got to get it up quickly, guided wizards that help you get things up and running quickly, and getting that maximizing that investment that you've made in your solution. Absolutely. All right, James.
Yeah, I mean, to the same points that you were saying about, it kind of aligns to the data, the storage being accessible by different means and open protocols. At the same time, every workflow, every use case is unique. For the most part, you'll have some differences. You want to make sure that you're able to support the appropriate needs, the I/O profile, the pattern, the data usage with the right type of storage, right? Throwing in the highest cost, fastest NVMe might not be the right solution if you can find a mix and match and best of both worlds. I'm very interested. I saw about gold copy in the last session and talking about ransomware. Is there something about storage type and having different options here that will actually help with ransomware?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of, first of all, getting to all types of storage, right? You really want every choice, right? You want NVMe, SSD, spinning disk, power down spinning disk, cloud, glacier, tape, all those different things need to be on the table. And yet wherever it's put, it needs to be easily accessible by the users, right? So they need to understand where it is and where it's coming from and find an easy way to get it back. In regards to ransomware, there's some cool things you can do. So I think there's been some discussions on that, in the prior conversations. But having copies on different storage mediums is one key way, right? So if I've got, something on tape and something on disk, just having that different format, it's unlikely that a ransomware attack is going to be targeted at both vectors. Having things geographically distributed, of course. And then also, obviously a big part of what we're messaging here is cost, right? So balancing the cost of storage with the speed of access that you need. And of course, there's a big drive to, cloud can really play nicely into this.
Touching on that, I'm curious what your perspective is on the public cloud, right? I know that historically, we sell actual systems and on-prem systems. But, at the same time, the full solution will probably have a use of public cloud. I mean, a lot of people don't want to maintain facilities costs, deal with power, cooling, and all that fun stuff. So what's your thought about integration and use of the public cloud?
Yeah, so recently met with a customer, and what did they say? Their cloud bill was the GDP of a small third world country or something like that. Like it was just, so you really have to you have to use it intelligently, right? So there's a couple things. Is what does the cloud provide, right? Well, it provides that offsite storage that can be affordable when done right. It also provides the services, right? So a couple key things that we look at as, especially like with regards to ransomware and having multiple copies, is maybe it makes sense because you should keep 2 copies of your data, right? So maybe you keep 1 copy in the cloud, but they get you on the access fees oftentimes, right? So keep a copy on site as well, and generally use the on-site copy unless you have some kind of disaster or problem. Then you can use that cloud copy. The other option is think about, maybe I put something in the cloud so that I use some cloud processing, right? Transcoding or some sort of AI process or distribution or something like that. But then I take it down when I'm done, and maybe I don't need it anymore, or maybe I store it only on site or whatever to save costs, right? So it's really about intelligent use of the cloud, absolutely, and also
That's
being
a
able
really
to.
good point. And just a really quick example that I've seen. I'm in LA, deal with a lot of media use cases and customers, and a big thing we're seeing is, in a media workflow, they have a theatrical release. It's all the high performance, content. It's the media assets, and then they're like, "Okay, I'm done. That was a lot of work. Let's push it to the cloud because we have a cloud policy." Well, what ends up happening is you get like the advertising marketing department, you get the home video department. Hey, we need those assets to now deal with once it's going to home video and whatnot. And yeah, I've had multiple customers have to pull all of that data out of a public cloud back to the local system. So what you're talking about just, hit a nerve, I guess I'll call it, with me, in that if you had some kind of nearline archive system on-prem before you go to the cloud, that absolutely is part of this whole solution design.
Absolutely. All right, James, well, maybe we'll wrap up the checklist and then talk about how Spectra and OpenDrives help address some of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just to review what we had gone over in the past couple slides, is looking at a complete or storage solution, or trying to design what you're trying to, to solve for your use case and your issues. We've seen that, Ethernet-based solutions tend to be the common moving forward connectivity. From there, open standards, right? Not locking into any specific protocol and or storage or file system format. That way you can allow for easy migration and data movement. The easy to get up and running, right? And we talked about the broadcasts. That's more of a extreme case, but if you're spending months and weeks, you're losing time and money while your stuff's sitting there trying to get useful, but it's not yet. And then lastly, integration with types of storage, right? There is, to the first example I made about like an impact driver or a drill, there's a time and a place to use a different tool. So it's all about best of breed, trying to find what solution fits your performance needs.
Great. Thanks, James. So here's a look at the OpenDrive Spectra joint solution. Over on the left, we've got what we call the primary storage tier, and that includes all the OpenDrive products, including Ultimate, Optimum, and Momentum, and James will touch a bit on OpenDrives a bit more in a second. And then on the right, we've got all types of what we call perpetual storage. So secondary storage that can include the cloud, that can include NAS or any file-based storage, as well as Black Pearl. And then, of course, straddling the two is StoreCycle, the SpectraLogic storage lifecycle management software. So what it can do is it can identify inactive data either automatically or on a project-by-project basis, and then copy or move it over to this perpetual storage tier, and you can make copies to a single location or multiple locations. We've done extensive testing with this. It's extremely fast, extremely reliable, and then OpenDrives enables all StoreCycle features, so it's a fully featured product. And so we'd love the opportunity to talk to you about why we believe this, more about why we believe this solution is special, but obviously the checklist we just reviewed is a good hint as to some of the highlights. On StoreCycle, I wanted to touch on a couple things. I mentioned that we support 2 data migration types. The first is migrating project directory. So we call this project-based archiving. This is essentially, I've got a project or a directory full of files, right? And I have used it for some period of time. Maybe it's an experimental data set. Maybe it's a reality TV show, footage or creation, season, something like that. And I am mostly done with it, and I want to move it off to this perpetual tier. It's a one-time event. I might tag it with some metadata, and I may move other projects in the future in the same way, and I want an easy repeatable way to do that. So that's one thing that StoreCycle is very good at. The other is more of an automated way. I've got a pool of files, maybe I've got an OpenDrives share, and I've got data all over, and I'm not really privy to projects or anything like that. I just know I need to get inactive data off of that system. So what StoreCycle can do is it can be pointed to a particular share or path. I regularly scan it on some scheduled basis, look for data that's past a certain age, and copy it off, right? That's something that you can do on an automated recurring basis. You're welcome to use both, so there's no limitations on StoreCycle as to how you use these. We have many customers that are using both concurrently, in different locations. And the great thing is you restore the data in exactly the same way, no matter which of the two you choose. When you take away the files, let's say you're going to take some data off of OpenDrives because it's inactive, move it to the perpetual tier. What are you going to leave in its place? What are you going to put in the place of the files that you're taking away? The first option we have is what we do is we replace the files with what we call HTML links. They're essentially HTML files with a similar name, but with a .html extension. When you open that file, it opens in your browser. It says, hey, this file's been archived. Here's when it was archived. Here's where it was archived to. So really providing that sort of future proofing. If it's years later and you open this HTML file, you'll see that the file's been archived. The HTML page also includes the ability to give you access to restore the files if you have the right permissions to do so. So that's all within the HTML file, and that's a really great tool especially for targets that have a longer restore time. So if you're using something like Amazon Glacier, or you're using tape where it's going to take minutes or hours for the data to come back, you're not really going to be able to trick the user into thinking that the file is still there. And so HTML links work well in that way. The second option is we can replace the file with symbolic links. Symbolic links are just an open standard. They're a pointer to another file. So if you archive the file to a NAS or file-based target to which a symbolic link can point, then we can move those files, replace them with symbolic links, and then any users or applications that access the files in the old location will be unaware that they've moved. So it's a transparent access. Now we also with StoreCycle have the ability to copy the files. Maybe you want to make protective copies, and you can do that as well. And the other option would be to replace the files, take them away, and don't leave anything in their place. Just take them away, take away the directories maybe. And if you want to get the file back, you go into the web interface to StoreCycle and get them back. We'd love the opportunity to talk to you more about StoreCycle. Reach out if you're interested or ask some questions here at the end. I would like James now to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about OpenDrives. Many of you may not be familiar with them. So James, take it away.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Especially if there's other verticals, use cases, markets. Yeah, you might not have heard of OpenDrives. We come from and had, I say, birthed out of the media entertainment, right? So some of these are some workflows that we use recently. Mank on Netflix was made fully on OpenDrives. We do a lot of broadcast esports workflows. We've now moved and have some customers and examples within the healthcare, architecture, anything that requires high throughput, large file video imaging workflows. We've seen a lot of success and use for our system. So yeah, this is just kind of where we've come from. We're moving into, like I mentioned, healthcare, some HPC workflows, as well as military applications. So next slide. So performance, right? We're talking about the active high performance storage. OpenDrive's approach is more than just performance when it comes to throughput and latency. It's about what we were talking about here, the full solution, right? We want to make sure that we align the right best of breed product to the appropriate use case. So in our conversations, rather than being like, here's our square peg, round hole, we want to see what is the problems, what's the solution, what are you trying to solve, what are your workflows, and then we work with you from there, and bring in partners as necessary to provide that full solution. Next slide, please. And then lastly, if you're interested, reach out and we can have some conversation. But the idea behind OpenDrives and our products and what you're seeing here with the Legos is we develop a modular architecture. We have compute, flash, capacity modules, and from there you can mix and match based on performance use cases and whatnot. Within last year, we've been pretty busy, so historically we've been scale up systems, and with our Atlas 2.0 release, we now can support scale out. So single namespace across multiple instances of the systems with high availability, redundancy, and so forth. So again, if you're interested, reach out. Don't want to go into a deep, here's our product line and everything, but did want to give some history for those that hadn't heard of us at all.
Thanks a lot, James.
Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, guys. Let's see. One question has already come in, and that's, lost my screen here. It says, I didn't see the solution mention stub files. Do you use stub files?
Right. Good question. So just to recap, what is a stub file? So a stub file is another method by which you sort of, trick a system into thinking that a file is still there. Unlike symbolic links, the way stub files work, though, is they actually traditionally have some bytes of the file, some of the first few bytes of the file, which allows an application to sort of think it's reading it. And then in the meantime, the data management application in the background is retrieving the file from a location that has a longer restore time, which has traditionally been tape. There's a couple problems with that solution that we don't like, though, that we've tended to avoid, and why we have the other options. And we kind of alluded to them in the best practices. The first is that we're not being transparent or clear to the user what's happening. The user or the application isn't aware that the file is on tape when they get and see this stub file. So as they access it, they start to wonder why it's taking so long. Some applications have to be, or file systems have to be adjusted to handle the longer restore time, and sometimes it may just time out. The other problem is that, to my knowledge, there's no open standard for stub files. It's a proprietary thing. So if you decide you're going to switch or get rid of a solution, it's no longer going to work, right? Whereas with our HTML link files, you can still open them and see where the file was archived to. With symlinks, they're an open standard and they point to the file independently of StoreCycle. You don't need StoreCycle to make those symlinks continue to work. And additionally, with our HTML links, we're very clear about communicating where the file is located and that they need to do a restore process. So we definitely like that much more. And the other concern with stub files is that you could accidentally trigger a gigantic restore and not even know it, right? You could have all your tape drives spinning up because you touched all these files just because you were trying to look at them or something, right? So there's a lot of accidental things that can happen. So those are the reasons we've avoided it.
And James, we also had a question come in that relates to your solutions, and it was when we were showing a prior slide that showed different types of storage solutions you had. And the question is, do you tier internally between different disk storage solutions? So on your solution set, what would you say about that?
Yeah, so between individual, so we have 3 series. We have the within our Ultra line, we have the Ultimate, which is an all NVMe. We have the Optimum, which is a hybrid solution, and the Momentum, which is all HDD. So between those different systems, we don't have an automatic tiering methodology. That's where we look to, the StoreCycle integration could help move, because it has the option to move to another NAS. That would be an option to do that. From, say, in the Optimum perspective, when we do have the hybrid of the NVMe, the high performance, as well as the disk storage, that is within that single system, or within the that scale up system, we will do automatic tiering between whether it's disk or NVMe or even RAM. We use it. Some of our technology is using RAM as a data spot and pinning higher traffic storage. That's how we get some really high throughputs and low latency responses.
Great. And I think that's what it was in reference to, that hybrid solution tiering in between those,
Gotcha.
or that particular array, if you will. Okay. All right. Great. Thanks, guys.